Hi, in this video we're going to discuss how to work on counting items in class case. So for this case, what we have is, we go to the memo, class and item totals. So number one, the case asks us to use SUMIF to count sales and profits by units, by item, and then use SUMIFs to count sales, profits, and units by item and class code. Okay. Make a table to summarize your totals. Use the pivot table to subtotal the data, sales, profit, and months, and units by item and class code. And create an executive summary. Compare and contrast results using SUMIF and pivot tables, which is better and why. Okay, so I just modified this a little bit. Here I say in the executive summary, I want you to compare and contrast your results from the data, but then also in the introduction, when you're talking about your Excel work, talk about the different tools, SUMIF and pivot tables, which tool is better and why. So we're really kind of, part of this case is to compare and contrast using SUMIF or pivot tables to get information. So let's go to the data. Here is the data. Make it bigger. I always want to make it bigger so you can see better. Okay, make it even bigger. A little bigger. Okay. So what we have here is item number, class code, and then we have our sales, profits, and units. So sum by item number. So this is the item number, and this is the total sales. So this item number is going to repeat. As you go down the file, you see this item number repeat multiple times with multiple codes. So we just want to add, give me all the 900s together for sales. So this is an easy thing to do. And I use a little hint here, use SUMIF formula. So here we're going to go insert function, SUMIF, and the range. So it's going to ask for the range. So this would be the range that we're going to work with. The criteria is going to be this value. And then the sum range is going to be what we want to sum. And here we want to sum sales. So I'm going to hit OK. And since when you select the whole column, you don't have to put in row numbers, which is great. So that's why I'm selecting the whole column. So I hit OK. And now I get the hashtags again. So we know that the first thing we should do is take away the zeros on that. OK. And this is sales dollars, so we should format that as currency. All right. Now, so all the 900s added together equal this amount. And if I just double click this down, when it gets from a white plus to a black plus, I can double click this down, and it's going to, since I used a G4 as the value, it's going to keep moving it down as the autofill formula takes over. So that was pretty simple. Now if I want to do total items per profit, so you're going to ask, well, can I just drag this over? No, because it's going to drag the columns over too. So I guess what you could do is you could lock down, using absolutes, you could lock down column A. So let's try to lock that down. So if we lock down column A here, and we move this over, it still doesn't work, because now we're moving from G to H. So we need to lock down just the G. We don't want to lock down the 4. So by doing that, I'm able quickly to move it over. So now if we review this, this is profits, is column D. So I'll open up the function box, and we see here that we're doing the range of A is our range. Criteria is G4, which we don't want the column G to move, but we do want the letter to move. And we'll see that this will go to 4 to 5 when I copy it down. And we want to sum range D, the profits. So I'm going to hit OK. And when you go down, you see that this moves to G5, G7, G8. So that's exactly what we want. So that worked. Now, if I move it over one more, and here we're counting units. So units are a number. So we're counting units here. This, I must have accidentally let me paint these to be dollars. Okay. So this is a unit. So that actually works. So we don't want to change column A, so that's why we have the dollar signs. We don't want to change to column G. We have the dollar sign before the G. We don't need the dollar sign before the 4 because we do want that to move. And column E is units. So this works. So it's an easy way to get that to work. Okay. So now let's move over to the next box, which is going to be some items by item number and class code A. So now we're going to use this. I should update this formula, this comment rather, because we want to use some ifs. Okay, so that's a slightly different function. So insert function some ifs. So now I can have different criteria. So the sum range, here is the, put this in as the sum range, is, you should remember the sum range are what I want to add together. So I want to add sales together here. And then let me just shrink these columns. Oops, getting them stuck in the, let me cancel this. I want to shrink these columns here so you could see on the screen what we're doing more easily. Okay, so let me go back to sum ifs. So the sum range would be sales because we're doing sales. So criteria range 1 would be the item. So the criteria would be item. Criteria range 2 would be the class code. So in the criteria here we're saying is class code A, so I'm going to put an A in there and hit OK. So then I get the total, and I can drop that down. Okay, so that worked. Now if we want to do profits, again, if I do a little configuring of the formula, so I want to lock down column, not column C, that can drift, although column A needs to be locked down, and class code B needs to be locked down. Okay, so now I could move this formula over. Now it's not going to pick anything up because D, A, so we have to let's modify this. Okay, so D is the sum range, that's correct. G is the criteria range, which was column A. Criteria is, it should be C shifted to M4, and we want L. So what I should have done here is, because we want L, the items. So I need to put $1 here to lock down that absolute. Okay, so if I pull this over, okay, so let's look at the sum ifs again. So D, we're adding on profits. Column A is items, so that should be locked down. Criteria is L4, so we want to stay on L, but we can let the number drift. And the criteria range is the second criteria range is the class code B, so that's locked down. But the criteria here is still A, so that's correct. Okay, so by doing that, I'm able to do that for both, copy it over for D column and then E column by creating a simple, modifying the formula. So eventually if you create the formula like that to begin with, then you would have no problem. So I could copy that down. Now this range here, I'll use my fast keys to get the bottom of the range. Oops. I want to, it's always, oops, I want to cancel that. I want to always have it the correct format. So this is going to be currency. No need to show the change. And okay, so that is sum by item number and class code. So then as you move forward, you're going to have item number and class code B. So can you copy these information and just go like that? Well, if you do anything like that, you're going to have to review. So it's saying column H here. So where is column H? Yeah, so we don't want, so that drifted, so that didn't work. Let me see. So over here, we wanted column C. So what we could do, if you did want to move this over, I could lock down C and C here. And I could lock down, because these are going to drift, so it won't work unless I lock these down if I want to copy from one grouping to another. So let me lock those down. So now when I copy them over, but this is class code B, so I'm going to have to go in and edit the formula to say B. And now, if I don't change it to B, it's not going to be correct, because I already have summed this for A. I need to sum it for B. Okay. So you see, if I do the see how these numbers are identical? Because this is doing A, and I had to change it over to B, and now it's B. Okay, so that's just the way if you want to kind of save some time setting the formulas up, because it can be, and now we have C, it can be a little lengthy if, edit this comment, some ifs. Okay. Now if you have a, so if you do have comments, there's a little thing. You can say copy, and then over here I can put in paste special, and I can select comments, and I can just copy over comments. Okay. All right, so over here, if we want to, we'll do it the long way once again. If I want to do sum ifs by number and class code, I want to go to formulas. So this is if you don't want to try and copy the formulas from one column to the next, and you can make mistakes if you're not careful. But if you want to do everything originally, you remember your sum range is going to be, first one is going to be by sales. So we have to come over here and select sales as our sum range. Our criteria range one is going to be the item. And the criteria for the item is going to be the item number. Oops. I put that in the same cell. Column here, criteria range here. I want item. And then criteria range 2 is going to be class code. And then the criteria for class code is going to be C. Okay. So, and then we just want to make sure everything is formatted for what you're showing. And if it's over $100, you don't need to show change. So I can, can easily do a format painter and, oops, I didn't want to do all those cells. All right. Can hit format painter. Oops. Let me try that again. Let me just highlight these three cells, format painter, and then, okay. So now when I copy it down, everything will be in the correct format. And let's just resize everything. There we go. Just resizing everything. Keep everything nice and clean and crisp. Now, I think I've shown this 3 times, so we're going to move on from here for the sum ifs. So then if we go back to the memo, the first thing was to use sum if to count class code and units and items. Next is to make a table to summarize the results. So you should create a new tab, move it over second place, and say it's called totals. And then you want to make some kind of grid. I'm going to pull in information from here. And try to use plus or equals, and then pull information from over here. Okay, so when you make a table, you always want to, and copy the formats over to make it a little easier. Okay, so when you create a table, you always want to link to where you're getting the data from. Because if you change anything over here, then you want to have it automatically reflect in the table. So if any of these numbers change, it'll automatically update the totals over here. So let's see. It'd be nice if I could just say copy, go over to paste special, and I want the values and number formats. Okay, and I can paste special formatting. Okay, so there's a couple different ways. You just want to bring the data over, make sure it's original, but now this won't be linked. So that's something that you always want this data linked. And you can just do that by hitting equals the cell and then move this over. So there's a couple different ways to bring the data over. And what you want to do is make a table that looks nice and summarizes the results with just the totals. I'm not going to go through the complete table, but you get an idea of what it should look like. Back to the memo, the third item, use pivot tables as subtotal of data by sales profits in units for item and class codes. Okay, so now we go back here, we have what's called the pivot table data. Pivot table data here. Sorry, you couldn't see the worksheets before. I made the totals worksheet here. It's not finished, just to give you an idea what you should be doing here, summarizing each of these columns into some sort of table, totaling everything. Okay, now if we go to the pivot table, here we have pivot table data. So it's asking us to do the same thing basically we did with sum ifs with pivot tables. Now also keep in mind that you see here that my total sales here don't match my total sales here, and that's okay because I'm not the items I'm asking for here are not everything in column A. So I'm not looking to get all the data here, just a subset of data. And there are some items in column A that are not included in the grid of column G. So if you see the column G ends here, and there are some extra item numbers in here that are not included, 1 or 2. So you are going to expect different totals from sales profits in units than what the total is for all the data. And that's okay. So we'll go back over here. This is the same, if you see these totals here, this is the same data here that we're using in the pivot table. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually delete these totals for right now because the pivot table is going to total everything up for me. And I'm going to put that there, just format that. I'm going to select highlight everything, almost 1,000 rows. And then I'm going to go to insert, and I'm going to insert a pivot table. So the pivot table is going to just reiterate my range, and I'm going to say OK. Now I have a pivot table. So I want to, let's see, sum of items. So okay, so I'm going to move the item number to the row, and then I could add class code in there. So I could put class code value over here, and I want to change that to, I want that to be a sum. Okay, well maybe I just want that over. Let me put that back over here. Okay, so let's keep it like that, and then we want total sales, profits, units. Okay, so that's easily done. So here I have A, B, C, D, total sales, profits, and units for each of the items. So that's a quick way. So you can see how the pivot table was much faster to, and at the very bottom here, I get my grand totals, and we should probably, let me format currency. And this is already in units. So if I scroll to the bottom, do these numbers match? Let's see. Yes, they match. So, which they should, because the pivot table is just quickly summarized all of the items by class code. So we have total sales for each item, and then total sales for each item and class code. So this is you see how faster and easier it was to use the pivot table to summarize that data. So the pivot table is something that you're learning in the LinkedIn Learning videos. So you should watch that LinkedIn Learning videos again if you have any trouble trying to put this pivot table together. But now that the pivot table is together, you know, quickly summarized our results. And you can play around with the pivot table as far as how you want to lay things out. And it's very convenient and quick to put these tables together. Okay. You can even go into charts and make charts off of these pivot tables. You have to kind of think of the charts that would. So if I kind of, maybe I just highlight this area, and you go into insert chart, you can quickly make some charts. I don't like the way that looks. Okay. So let's move back to the memo. So okay, so all that's left to do is to create the executive summary. And then in the executive summary, in this case, let's move this to the front. You're going to talk about, in the first introduction section, the difference between using sum ifs and pivot tables. And we'll just rename this pivot results. And you see how that if I click on anywhere in here, the pivot table field list will come back. And just by checking and unchecking, items appear and disappear. And the way, see, the order you check it in is the order that they'll appear. Okay, so just move back. So in the executive summary and the introduction, you'll talk about the basic problem you're trying to solve in the Excel usage, and then the financial analysis is really all you have to go by is these different numbers and class codes. So you could talk about in your table that you made the differences in sales and profits by the different class codes. And then finally, you could make some recommendations about which class code is most profitable, A, B, C, D, which items are most profitable. So you can do like a top 10, a bottom 10. So just basically a fundamental financial analysis on just the data you've been given. So there's no real other information other than what you can work with from the tables. And that's how you would round out the executive summary. Okay, so that's the video to help you get started in completing the counting items in class code spreadsheet. Thank you for your time, and I hope you found this helpful.